Ready? Oh. Shablona kodwa qala.
That's what they say. Your heroes will disappoint you.
But then that's also unfair to say people.
No.
I'm saying that I think for this moment, we want to have a moment. I'm not usually that person on time, but
Yeah, let's start.
yes,
Yeah, 5 minutes is fine.
5 minutes is fine, yes. Now,
This is going to 15 minutes.
exactly. Now I'm like, it is like this is what happens when you leave them to themselves.
How about?
It's like, now
Yeah,
I'm
about?
ready.
Or are they decolonizing time?
Exactly. That's like the African time thing, like typical.
Yeah. No. Let's start. No, until 2018.
But the scholarship,
I was.
until the one who's doing the opening, dude.
She forgot.
Yes. No,
Every two second place is a pub here.
oh yeah.
The parrot is still there. The parrot.
Oh, it's an institution.
It's an institution, no?
You're not something.
Are you gonna stand up with us top from there? Are you gonna do the tour here or there? Okay. Yes, I think so. you.
Obvious. Because you got this.
Yes, this one is like
No, it's fine.
okay. Good evening, colleagues, and welcome. My name is Woyo. Okay, let's start now, sorry. My name is Woyo. I'm from the Division of Equity and its Horticulture Office, and my role this evening is just going to welcome you and open the discussion. And first of all, I'm going to introduce myself, and I just want to say on behalf of the ENIC, which is the Division, I'd like to personally welcome all our students to this discussion, the SRC, and all the colleagues who are present this evening. And I would also like to extend a special welcome to Prof. Madlingozi. Thank you for agreeing to facilitate this conversation. Okay, sorry, I have to change my mic. Thank you for agreeing to facilitate
Thank you.
this difficult discussion with our students. It is an honor and a privilege to get to chat to you this evening and to tap into your great legal mind. I'm looking forward to the conversation. To our moderator, Ms. Ziko Dana from the Department of Political and International Studies. Thank you. Okay, Zico has hands. Thank you for this partnership in this series and your continued support. Thank you. To Eric and Mr. Saki Tlaveza, who's they're not here this evening yet. I just want to thank you in their absence for helping me think, or helping our team think about this in the past couple of weeks building to tonight. And to Tembale, to our admin support, you know guys, our office is very small. But thank you for working seamlessly in the background and enjoying and putting together Prof and getting him here actually safe and sound. And we are set and ready to go. Thank you, Vakun, was it? Lastly, to our student body, I invite you to partner with the ENIC in this series. This series is going to run throughout the year. And please use today's discussion to share your thoughts and ideas on how we can create a more inclusive and equitable university community. And I hope you're going to leave with something from Prof today that you are going to use as we imagine our university and we think about engaging with the university and executive leadership.
Thank you so much for your warm welcome. And welcome and to everyone else. So I'm just going to read a few opening remarks and then I'll introduce our wonderful prof and then we'll take it from there, okay? So the post-1994 political dispensation, known to many as the miracle that Africa so desperately needed, as Africa, like most colonized parts of the world, was and to some extent continues to be the playground of power-obsessed demigods and politicians. This political movement, also known as the bloodless transition, brought with it some sense of hope for unity with diversity. And that South Africa is alive with possibilities. Even TV catchphrases such as, and I'll sing it for you. Sing it. That's for those of you who know, you know, and for those of you who don't know, you don't listen out on anything. Anyway, So these catchphrases and TV adverts have come to be viewed as slogans which serve as rallying calls for unity. Unity was indeed achieved, but certainly not the unity where justice, honesty, accountability, and agreement were guaranteed to address the history that refuses to be in the past for the country south of Africa. With its so-called progressive constitution and veneration of human rights and private property, and of course with a fairly young democracy of a little bit over 3 decades. After the 1994 movement, the progress of this constitution is yet to be realized for many of us. Like the Kurumani support group, Abatali Basemjolo, Madlingozi, known publicly to me and my peers as Gossip Johnson, Fezekile Ngela Muzwayo, known to the public as Kwezi, the Massacred miners of Marikana, Andrew Stajani, who by the time of his passing was exactly my age. And many more strategically unnamed cities in the country, which I think from these are not going to deny what I'm about to say, but these people and their bodies there and their riotous deaths can be seen as those who are their victims. They also serve as a reminder that Simuli, we are one, but not with you. A better life for all, but not for all of you. As reality set in for Africans in the south of Africa, we were reminded that in the Rainbow Nation narrative, we did not put food on the table. We did not pay their children's tuition fees or that is quality colonial education. We did not protect their children from sexually, financially, physically, mentally, and racially abused children, particularly in the confinement of learning spaces, in higher education or the lower levels. Of course, we know this by now that universities or any other institution of learning, particularly higher education, are microcosms of society. We are reminded that even those who were referred to as the future, one is not immune to the social ills that haunt the so-called young democracy. The university currently known, or still known as Rhodes University, as the fondest referred to it, is also not immune from colonial and continued apartheid or neo-apartheid continuities. Not even your purple Thursdays will save you from the social ills that we face on the so-called Rhodes culture, where your Tibetan parents is your place to go. It's not true. The call for a decolonial and financially accessible education for Africans is not a novel matter, as we know this. There's nothing special or new about what we've seen or as the cause for decolonial education. But the Black student movement, from as early as 2014 at Rhodes University, when they occupied the council chambers, reminded us that indeed Black is not part of the rainbow, as they were part of the group of students. Accommodation is and Black students are mostly affected by this. They also have scholars like Malaika wa Azalia, who refers to universities or higher education institutions as colleges of death. And I'm not saying it will die, eventually, but hopefully we won't be dying because of those universities. I'm not the prophet of God or anything. Anyway, like the best victims of the Shabu massacre, which commemorated 65 years since the earlier founders of the Pan-Africanist Congress refused to be reduced to mere units of labor. The contemporary founders were met with the might of the constitutional law. They were reminded of the unfreedom that anyone who goes against the new South Africa is usually dealt with a clear message that the past very much and as the colleagues would say, because they refused to let this line down, and know the sense of reality, but they really said that to Mahuni were Matar. Another rude awakening for the students, particularly women, non-gender conforming people, and feminized men, also showed his face, whereby we were reminded that protests for the falling of Rhodes University or Rhodes or Cecil John Rhodes, the falling of fees, the falling of colonial education, the falling of capitalism, and the falling of outsourcing were not enough to disrupt the status quo. Patriarchy had to fall, rape and rape culture had to fall, transphobia had to fall for this society to make sense for all. So today, after 10 years of the national student protest of the forest movement, we are going to reflect and hopefully learn from Professor Madlingozi on what has changed, what has stayed the same, and what epistemic ruptures and continuities this movement has ushered higher education. With that being said, this is not about me, this is about our wonderful prof. Now I'll read a very exciting, excellent bio. So Professor Tsepo Madlingozi is the Commissioner of the South African Human Rights Commission. I mean, he is the full-time Commissioner of the South African Human Rights Commission. Yes. Commissioner Tsepo Madlingozi studied law and sociology in South Africa, Cameroon, and the United Kingdom. Before being appointed to the commission, he was the Deputy Director of the Center of Applied Legal Studies at Wits University and an Associate Professor at the same university, where he taught human rights and social justice. He has been a consultant for local organizations and intergovernmental organizations, including the Pan-African Parliament and the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. He sat on the board of several civil society organizations, including the board of the following civil society organizations: the Rural Democracy Trust, the Mining Affiliated Communities United in Action / Women Affected by Mining Action, the Institute for Social Dialogue, the Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa, IMBIZA, Journal of African Writing, the Center for Human Rights, the Zimbabwe Exiles, the UFS, Amanda.org, and the Africa Legal Affairs University. He was also a member of the steering committee of the African Coalition for Corporate Accountability, the Right to Protest Project Coalition, and the advisory board of the Health Justice Initiative. For 30 years, he worked with and for Human Support Group, a 120,000 strong social movement of victims and survivors of apartheid, as National Advocacy Coordinator and later the chairperson. Between 2021 and 2022, he was appointed chief panelist for the South African Human Rights Commission inquiry into racial discrimination and other forms of discrimination in advertising. And yes, he is biased to continues, but I'll be done soon. Okay. He is a visiting professor of the International Institute of Social Sciences of Erasmus University Rotterdam and a faculty member of the Vienna Master of Arts in Applied Human Rights. He is a co-editor of the South African Journal of Human Rights. He is a coordinator of Symbol or Substance Socio-Economic Rights in South Africa, Cambridge, and UP, that's the University of Pretoria. And a co-editor of Introduction to Law and Legal Science in South Africa, second edition, Oxford University, South Africa. To me and to my scholarship, I like to refer to him as the rock star of social justice. So welcome back to my country, Prof. And I hope you will be sharing your insights with us, and the young people will learn because they have a lot to learn. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here. The last time I was here, I think it was in 2016. 2016, long time ago. Things have changed. Things have not changed. So I want to thank the center for inviting me, Vuyo and the Madlin and the colleagues. Thank you so much for making it possible for us to be here, but also for your flexibility. I know it was very difficult to make this happen. I look forward to chatting with Zico and the colleagues. I was told that, I need to use the mic. Okay. I was told that I'm not giving a speech. I'm facilitating a discussion.
Yes?
Yes? So we're going to talk and debate.
Yes?
Yes? It's too late in the day to make a long speech, right? So we
As
Zico said, we are reflecting on 10 years of Fees Must Fall. 10 years. It's also an anniversary of several other milestones. So this year is also the 70th anniversary of the Freedom Charter. Remember the Freedom Charter? 70th anniversary. It opens with the words, South Africa belongs to all who live in it.
Yes?
Yes? It ends with the words, let there be friendship and peace for all. What are the conditions for South Africa to belong to all who live in it? What are those conditions? And what are the conditions for peace and friendship? There's no peace and friendship in South Africa. South Africa does not belong to all who live in it. Isn't that so? This year is also the 30th anniversary of the establishment of Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Do you know about that one? The TRC. Yeah? The TRC being a vehicle for nation building and reconciliation. Is South Africa a nation today? Have we achieved reconciliation and nation building? We have not. So Fees Must Fall and its anniversary must be located in this unfinished business of the national question. The unfinished business of the national question. If we were to reflect on Fees Must Fall as simply a reflection on how far we have come in terms of decolonizing our universities, we'll be making a big mistake, colleagues. We'll be making a big mistake. We need to critique and reflect on Fees Must Fall from the question of how far have we come in terms of resolving the national question. The unfinished business of reparation, the unfinished business of restitution, the unfinished business of redress, what I call the 3 R's. I like to use R even though I can't pronounce it. The 3 R's of decolonization: restitution, reparation, and redress. How far have we come and where are we missing the mark? To jump to the end. Fees Must Fall has achieved certain things, but a lot has not been achieved. This is an assessment, right? There's been some achievements, but there's been some rollbacks even. Yes? There's even been defeats. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Tsebo. You know what that means, right?
Come here.
It means hope. So I'm a naive, hopeful guy. I'm hopeful. My surname is Madlingozi. You know what that means? If hope doesn't work, we go to the second part.
overseas, I wanted to introduce myself to say I come from a country without a name, just called South Africa. Only one of 3 countries in Africa without a name. You know the other 2? I'm no longer a lecturer, so I miss it when I get a word. One of 3 countries without a name in Africa. What are the other 2? Central African Republic. Yeah? South Africa, Central African Republic. What is the other one? Western Sahara. That's Western Sahara. What does it mean to come from a country without a name? What does it mean politically? What does it mean culturally? What does it mean psychically? What does it mean epistemologically? To come from a country without a name. A country whose name was given to it only in 1910, not old. 1910, given by colonizers. Yes? So, as we reflect on Feast Must Fall, the struggle for decolonized education, we need to open up the conversation to these wider questions of what I call unhomeliness, not being at home. Black people are not at home in South Africa. The sense of unhomeliness. In 1916, Solomon T. writes a book called Native Life in South Africa. Native Life in South Africa. It opens with the words. In 1913, the native woke up, awakening in 1913. The native woke up not as a slave, but as a pariah in the land of their birth. You know what's a pariah? Someone who doesn't belong. That was in 1916. The native woke up, awakening in 1913. The native found themselves not a slave, but a pariah in the land of their birth. For black, being pariah is worse than being a slave.
In 2025, are black people still pariahs in South Africa? Or do they have a sense of identity, belonging, and rootedness? So Feast Must Fall, as you know, focus on a number of things, maybe 4 main pillars. The one pillar was the unmasking of whiteness and coloniality, the unmasking of whiteness and coloniality. The second one was the dismantling of certain university cultures. The dismantling of a culture of neoliberalism in universities. Therefore, the fight for insourcing. The dismantling of a culture of competition amongst professors and the faculty. You know, this lack of collegiality. Publish or perish. Some of us have perished. Montando are still there thriving. Some of us have perished. Publish or perish. Don't share your work. Compete with one another. Of course, it seeps into the classroom. And that is encouraged among students. You must compete because only 5 of you are going to get jobs. So don't share, work with each other. Right? The third thing, of course, was the need to center African knowledges and African experiences. to decenter Western epistemologies, to center African knowledges and epistemologies. Not the doing away with Western epistemology. No, the centering of African epistemology. There's a difference, right? Not the complete destruction of Western epistemology. Some of us still want Marx. We like Marx. Even though we stretch Marx, Karl Marx a little bit. Right? Foucault, and so forth and so forth. But the centering of African knowledges and experiences. So that when students are in the classroom, they speak from their humanity. They speak from their humanity, underline, italize, make bold. What does it mean to speak from your humanity? 10 years later, if you're in the classroom, do you feel that you are allowed to speak from your humanity? Or are you expected to be something else? Those of us with accents like mine, this Bantu accent, we've got a problem. We struggle. But then lastly was this question of belonging. When we walk around the university, we don't feel that we're in Africa. The question of alienation, the statues, the architecture, the aesthetics of the university is completely alienating. Not only that, that if we are honest with ourselves, when we walk in the university, we feel the spirit of the oppressors. We feel the spirits of the oppressors. Because the statue is a statue of the oppressor. And of course, in our cosmology, those statues are alive. They're not just monuments. They are live, energetic assets. They are live things. In the buildings, when you walk around Rhodes University, my goodness, you feel like you're in a theme park. You feel like you are in a theme park in Africa. You know the theme park? Like a Disneyland, Disney World. It's like, no, this is not true, just a theme park. Surely, it's not natural. The struggle for alienation, the struggle for being humanized in the classroom and in the spaces, the struggle to dismantle institutional cultures, right? And of course, the struggle for access. University fees are too expensive. I'm going to reveal my age. But in 2006, I wrote an article, published an article called, what were you in 2006? I hope at least you were born, at least. The name of the article is Confronting and Dismantling Institutional Racism in the Law Faculty of the University of Pretoria. Confronting and Dismantling Institutional Racism at the University of Pretoria. That was in 2006, before it became fashionable to talk about racism in universities. But not only that, I deliberately called it institutional racism. That what is important for me is not whether somebody hates me or not, interpersonal hatred. What for me is important is the institutional culture that legitimizes whiteness, that valorizes whiteness. A racist, patriarchal, institutional culture, a homophobic, transphobic, ableist, xenophobic institutional culture. 2006. When we reflect on Feast Must Fall and the struggle for decoloniality, it has become a struggle for metaphors. Who can quote Fanon and who can quote Biko? And who can quote bell hooks? Metaphors. Changing the name of the university, the name of buildings. When I was coming here, I said to someone, I'm on my way to Kempston. They said, no, it's Makanda. I said, what makes it Makanda? What makes it Makanda? Or Makana, or whatever. So you can change the name of the university, and you feel good. But the institutional culture is still sexist, racist, ableist, xenophobic, homophobic. Institutional culture. So when we reflect on Feast Must Fall, you look at a lot of universities, buildings have changed, statues have fallen, but the culture remains the same. Okay, maybe the VC is different color, or a different gender. But we know what happens when people step into the shoes of the former master. In Africa, only one leader did not move into the master's house physically. Did not move into the old governor's house in Africa. All of them moved into the union buildings. They moved into the residence vacated by the colonial master. What does it mean to move into the house of the colonial master? Ndebe Mandela leaves the prison and say, I want my house to be built like that prison. You know, he was in the house in the later years of his imprisonment. Right? What was that house called again? What is it called? Yes, Victor Festel. Said, hey, that was so nice. Can you build my house like that, please? What does that mean? Only Julius Nyerere said, I don't want to move into the colonial house. Let's make it a museum. In other parts of Africa, they changed the name. What do you call the presidential house in Cape Town now? Give it a nice name. It's a Zulu name. So, if you don't attend to the institutional culture, you stay where you are. So, that was in 2006. I'm still saying the same thing. The need not to only talk about in the curriculum, let's see more Bigo, let's see more Nyerere, let's see more bell hooks. Yes, you can change that. And the name of the buildings, but the culture remains the same. You can't afford fees, you can't afford accommodation, there is no water, there is a fear to protest. Why is there fear 10 years after Feast Must Fall? There's a mistake that we made somewhere, even though we feel good about ourselves. Together with some students, we set up something called Tsepo's Legal Shibin. Tsepo's Legal Shibin. You know what's a Shibin? Tsepo's Legal Shibin. That was in 2008 or 2009. A legal Shibin. A Shibin is an illegal space, right? It's a place where people are not allowed to drink, but they drink undercover. During apartheid and colonialism, Shibin. An illegal space. But this one is called a legal Shibin. You get the paradox. And we set it up for 3 reasons. Tsepo's Legal Shibin, 2008, still continues even today. And in the University of Pretoria, in UNISA, and other places. Students were saying to me, you know, in the classroom, we don't have time to debate. We debate and then we have to cut off. Or we are scared to debate with the lecturer, the master, the know-it-all. But still, we set it up together with two of my students because students do not know each other. You don't know each other. You meet in the classroom, you meet when you do other things, but you really know each other, where you come from. So we used to meet every 2 weeks and watch a documentary and debate what we see in the documentary. Or just introduce a topic, xenophobia, or intersex, and then debate that topic. But also the idea was that we need to decolonize and transform the university from below. Right? I've spoken about institutional culture that have not changed as one of the mistakes of both fees must fall and so-called decoloniality. The second mistake is decoloniality and fees must fall from above, delivered by lecturers, delivered by the management of the university. Have you seen that? Transformation and decolonization is driven by the management, by the university. That's fine. We need their resources, we need their political will. But it must also be from below. So that's why we set up Sabos leadership in. A transformation from below, platform not authorized by the university, outside of the university. That's why it's called Sabos leadership in, at the border of the university. What are we doing to transform the university as students ourselves? Or are we waiting for the university to propose transformation and decolonization? Are we waiting for the university to, and your office, to come up with all these measures? What are we doing ourselves? So that's the second mistake, decolonization and transformation from above. From above. That's a serious mistake. You know, 55 years ago, Steve Biko came alive here at Rhodes, remember, right? It was here at this university.
Yep.
Where Biko woke up, Steve Biko woke up, right? So wokeness started here. Wokeness. Let's let people diss. No, you shouldn't diss wokeness. Steve Biko woke up here, became woke here. Anyway, in their first manifesto, the SASO Manifesto of 1969, the SASO Manifesto, South African Students Organization, 1969. They've now broken away from white institutions and white organizations. They've set up their blacks-only institution. By the way, as a footnote, it's interesting that they call it the South African Students Organization. They don't call it the Black Students Organization. They call it the South African Student Organization, not the Black Student Organization. It's a footnote for you to reflect on why would they do so. Anyway, the first line of that manifesto says, we black students understanding that we are not separate from the community. That's the first line. We black students understanding that we are not separate from the community. Then the last line, 3 bullet points. The third one, we therefore commit in a disciplined way to change the social and material lives of our communities. So this idea that we're not just students, we are also members of the oppressed society. The third mistake that we've seen with Fees Must Fall and decolonial scholars is this idea of you can decolonize university without decolonizing society. Come on, you are joking. You can decolonize the university without decolonizing society. So in 1969, Steve Biko and his colleagues already tell us that in order for you to really transform and decolonize, You need to understand your dual identity, your hybrid identity. I've talked about anniversary. There's also another anniversary. 50 years ago, Robert Sibugwe became a lawyer. Do you know he was a lawyer, right? People don't know that. So 50 years ago, he was admitted as a lawyer, Robert Sibugwe. Anyway, in his speech at his university, when he was still a student, and he had to give a speech, the famous speech where he talks about remembering Africa. Remembering Africa. The first line of that speech says, "Sons and daughters of Africa, you are the harbingers of the new world." Sons and daughters of Africa, you are the harbingers, you are the bringers of the new world. The second line, the whole existence in South Africa is a political existence. The whole existence is a political existence. And the last line, of course, remember Africa, remember Africa. We quote Steve Biko, we quote Robert Sibugwe, but do we actually live their lives? And this insistence from both of them. And we need to be student activists as well as social activists. It's a tall order, but we must do that. There's no water in this town. There's so many social ills. Do we isolate ourselves as students? In 2007, I've got an article called Beyond the Ivory Tower, 2007. Beyond the Ivory Tower. You can already hear where I was going with this article. Beyond the Ivory Tower. That as progressive academics, if we are serious about progressive politics, we need to go beyond the Ivory Tower. I've spoken for long. What does it mean to remember Africa? Remember in two senses. Remember Africa, as in recall Africa. Re-member Africa. Re-member Africa. What does it mean to remember Africa in both ways? It is an understanding that settler colonialism was not only about land dispossession, about economic subjugation, about the institutionalization of homophobia, xenophobia, apartheid, and ableism. But that at the heart of settler colonialism was the shattering of the socio-cultural worlds of indigenous people. This is a true understanding of my Buye Africa. How do we understand that today? It means returning Africa, resurrecting Africa, remembering Africa, and remembering Africa from a social, material, spiritual perspective. From the material, fees must fall, accommodation, access. Social, from an intersubjective perspective. I'm a commissioner for anti-racism. In 2025, we still have a commissioner for anti-racism. Why do I need to be a commissioner for anti-racism? It's because we receive about 490 complaints of racism every year at the Human Rights Commission. Racism is still embedded in our society. So from a social perspective, we are not yet a nation. Yes, we are a nation when the Springbok wins, or when Bafana wins. And then we stronger together. Then some go to the mansions, and then some go to the sheikhs. But what does it mean to remember Africa from a spiritual perspective? What is the role of spirituality in your life as students? The third mistakes of Feast Must Fall was the lack of spirituality. By spirituality, I don't mean God. I mean spirituality. What would it mean to have spirituality in our activism? What would it mean to have spirituality in our activism? You will recall that during Feast Must Fall, Zico, that there was homophobia amongst the students. There was rape amongst the students. They don't want me to talk about rape. No, I'm joking. There was transphobia amongst the students. What is the role of spirituality? Decoloniality without spirituality is coloniality. What does it mean to say decoloniality is coloniality in some senses? Let's debate that. Thank you.
I think those mics are on. Oh, okay, the mics are not. Is your mic working?
It's flashing.
It's flashing, but it's working. Oh, okay.
It's for decoration.
Oh, wow, for aesthetics. Oh, wow, you might see that. Okay. Thank you so much, Prof, for your insightful talk, even though it wasn't a talk, but just your conversation with the students. And it is very important that you closed off with the importance of spirituality. And then I'm curious, because when people speak of spirituality, you clearly stated that we're not talking about religion, right? But what happens then if religion is more attractive than spirituality, and sometimes people are not even aware that they have never addressed the question of spirituality, and that religion has been the opium to which people return to when life sounds unbearable. And how do they make sense of this? And perhaps can you share with the students what you would refer to as a background or as a start to reclaiming one's spirituality?
No, so as I said, the symptoms of colonialism is racism. Racism is a symptom, not the root cause of our problems. Land dispossession is a symptom. Economic subjugation and economic apartheid that continues is a symptom. But what is the root cause of our problems? What is the root cause of our problems? Spirituality says two things. Spirituality, one says there's a higher being, higher energy, higher divine, Jah, God, Allah, Buddha, the tree, the air, right? Kamat. This is higher. I am just a simple thing. There's something bigger than me. That lack of recognition that there's something bigger than me has created a lot of problems. Spirituality, secondly, says we are fundamentally interconnected. As we say in my language. Right? Ubuntu. Decoloniality without that sense of interconnectedness amongst all of us. And by all of us, I mean everyone who lives in South Africa. And spirituality therefore says our purpose in life is to serve. Fundamentally to serve. So what does it mean to have an activism that does not recognize a higher soul force? An activism that is about superstar activists. You know, people win awards for being activists. Yep. You know, the list, the number one activists. Now this number one decolonial scholars people talk about. So even within decolonialities, the top decolonial scholar, my goodness. My goodness. Huh? And what does it mean not to fundamentally understand that our purpose in life is to serve others? And that's what Sbugo talks about. They need to subjugate yourself. He uses the word subjugate yourself to the masses. Epistemicide. What is epistemicide? The death of knowledges, cultures, religion. So the centralization of only religion is continues the epistemicide. I spoke about Truth and Reconciliation Commission. At the heart of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was Christianity. You must forgive in a Christian way. You must turn the other cheek. But of course, in Ubuntu, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. Ubuntu is about truth and justice. Then we can talk about other things.
Yep.
But we need to talk about the truth of what happened. In South Africa, we don't. The Constitution talks about conflicts of the past. Conflicts of the past. What is that? There was no conflict. There was war of dispossession. There was conquest. There was slavery. Most people don't know that there was slavery in South Africa. Most people don't know that there was genocide in South Africa. Genocide, not massacres, genocide in South Africa. Ubuntu talks about justice. You know, I use the example that I heard from one pastor. Someone comes, steals your bicycle. A few years later, after 10 years, they come and say, I'm sorry I stole your bicycle. Then you say, okay, I forgive you. You shake hands. Then you say, sharp. And then they walk away with the bicycle. Yes, I've forgiven you, but yeah. So even we see it even in the Truth Commission, a pesticide continuing. And by pesticide we mean not only the suppression and the displacement of non-Western epistemologies, we also mean the cannibalization of those epistemologies. So the use of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is very popular, but Ubuntu says you must forget. Forgive and forget, right? So, yeah, epistemicide does continue in our institutions. I mean, if you look at Parliament, my goodness, how sad is Parliament? Those guys can't speak English, and there's a point of order. You know how beautiful it is if they were to speak their languages all the time. But all of them want to conform to this Westminster system in this very institution of public representation. What does it mean? So, a pessimicide in all our institutions.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Because we're running out of time, I'll just ask one last question, then we'll take it to the floor. So you spoke briefly about the academic rat race, right? Where either institutions are chasing rankings, professors are chasing promotions, students are chasing these so-called scarce jobs. But here's the thing, you also spoke about the importance of social activism, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, you and I didn't go to our nearest so-called historically black universities.
Yeah.
You went to UP, I came to Rhodes University. And because these universities were the so-called epitomes of excellence.
Yeah.
But the thing is, some of us tend to run away from our societies because there's far more danger in our societies than we usually face here in institutions such as Rhodes University, whereby even assimilation becomes easier than returning and to even pay forward to our societies. How can students in this current dispensation, whether political, economical, how can they start or initiate the process of building bridges with either institutions or themselves as individuals and of course their communities?
Yeah, no, we should not feel guilty for looking for opportunities elsewhere. You know, there's this stupid thing that says you must not move out of the township. Why do you want want to stay in the township if you can afford to go out of the township. And then now we dress it up ghetto fabulous, Kasi culture. No, the townships are devscapes. They were created as devscapes. So this thing of making people feel guilty for fleeing the township, the ghetto, is wrong. Similarly, to say that you must go to a historically black university, why don't you go to, no, I won't mention them, but those universities. No, I mean, if you go there, sometimes the resources are not there. And they're not there because historically that's how they've been. They were never built as institutions of humanizing. They were built as institutions to create an administrative layer, clerks and people like that. All these universities. So why should I go there? Right? And of course you can go there and as a woman you suffer from xenophobia or sexism. So going to a black university does not save you from some of these things. You talk about assimilation. It's never possible to fully assimilate, of course. It's never possible to assimilate. So that's one thing. The second thing is that we should not feel guilty as, I'm a first generation student. You know what's a first generation student? Most of us here are first generation students, meaning in our families, in our community, we're the first ones to go to university. First generation. In 2025, we are first generation students. And we've got responsibilities back home to go back and uplift socio-economically others. So we shouldn't feel guilty to try to work hard so we can have social mobility. So one recognizes that all of us want to work hard to get the best marks so we can get the best jobs. And therefore sometimes activism is secondary. We should not feel guilty for that because we've got so much responsibilities, some of us. Those of us with trust fund babies, we can afford to play around. But some of us, we've got responsibilities. So one recognizes that. But we thought a measure of activism, not 24 hours, not 7 days a week. You will have this situation that we have in South Africa where the middle class think we can isolate ourselves from the problems of South Africa. So I've got a solar so that when there's load shedding, I'm fine. You've got a water tank because if there's a water cut-off, you are fine. You've got private healthcare. You've got private education. You've got private security. You think you can isolate yourself. You can't. They are coming for you. Who's they? You will see.
Okay, not to scare anyone, but someone is coming for someone. I would like to take the conversation to the floor. Any questions? I will take the first 3 questions and then we will proceed to take more questions. Okay, we will start with you, my sister, Skumbuzo, and we'll close it with you. This is our first round, okay? It works.
Why are you hitting it down?
Okay.
Hey, good evening, Prof. Thank you so much for joining us and gracing us with your presence. I have been looking forward to this. You're cutting a bit of what and my question is a bit long, so please bear with me. But let's take from it maybe the rupture of movement activism. Right. So it goes, while the movement of 2015-2016 is characterized by a revolutionary energy, there seems to be a kind of political fatigue and disillusionment with today's generation. Movements have come to form as a momentary protest rather than a tangible and long-term means to effect change. Who then carries the baton when the spirit of resistance seems to fade? who in the light of this landscape of capitalized intellectual labor and institutional capture will revive the revolutionary zeal that was once espoused to student activism? Are we as a new generation, 10 years after the first movement, living in a nervous condition? How do we grapple with the contradictions of yearning for meaningful institutional changes and the realities of commodified resistance and intellectual labor within a neoliberal society? Is our activism now revolutionary or reactionary to momentary conditions instead of fostering long-term transformation? So in what way then can intergenerational dialogue and unity be fostered to establish the continuity and vigor of student activism?
Correct. Thank
The danger of the problem of nation is that we don't know the ways of the country. We don't know the ways of the people and so on.
The woods.
The names.
Uterus womb.
The wounds of the country. We don't know. I'm saying this because when we talk about civil and with that kind we talk about the senior. We will also understand it as collective, but also we will understand it as about society in the country specifically. As much yes. And I want to tie this to the issue around spirituality. I think it's a lie when you say that there wasn't spirituality within the reference for because the songs that we sing, they kind of one forms more over time. Really echoing what is happening at the time. And so in that way, I want to then ask as to whose spirituality do we actually recognize when we think of the state of our
Again? Whose spirituality do we recognize?
when we talk about thinking about the state of paradise?
The lady in purple. The lady in purple.
Can you hear the back there?
Please project in that. Please
This
project.
microphones.
Now.
I think your voice should also assist. Yeah.
Okay, so my question is maybe based on how the community and themselves have intertwined and how you stated that the university cannot change without the community changing. So I think we can agree that colonization and apartheid was psychological warfare. And that has passed on generationally. We still see that to this day. So for us to even actually go back into our community and to try and make a change, I think my question would be, how do we make a change into our communities when we are dealing with that psychological aspect that is still making it difficult to have conversations or transformative conversations when there is that psychological boundary or binding within a lot of our Black community. And, I think
Thank you. Okay, over to you, Prof. Thank you so much for the question.
No, thank you so much for those questions. Fatigue. You use the word fatigue, and you use the word disillusionment. Yeah, it is. From a distance, I see that. I see fatigue. I see disillusionment, and it comes from the sense of, but is it worth it? Is it worth it? I know a lot of mentees of mine who had to drop out of the university, not because they were expelled, but because the struggle exerted so much psychosocial toll on them. Some of them were arrested for a weekend, or they were taken by the police for 2 hours into the cells, police cells. But they live with anxiety today, serious anxiety, serious depression. So I think some people say, but it's not that we are cowards, but are the costs worth it if we look at what has been achieved? So I sympathize with that. That people are, some of them are scared because people were expelled. And you remember how the university dealt with Fees Must Fall. It isolated certain leaders. Isolated and dealt with them. And took certain leaders into them management, right? Divide and conquer. And creating paranoia among students. Who's spying on us? We had this meeting, but now there are videos from that meeting. It was bad. It was bad. I don't wish for Fees Must Fall personally because of what happened in my office and so forth. So one can understand that, but the second thing, as I say, is this question of, this was a nationwide massive movement over a long time. But if you look at the results, what has been achieved. So now you ask, what can we do to dismantle that sense of fatigue and disillusionment? I turn that question back to you as students. I don't want to prescribe, okay? I've got my views, but I don't want to prescribe. I want to hear from students. Because protest is your right. It's your right to protest, right? You've got the right to protest. No, I'm a commissioner. I can tell you that. I can protect you. I'll protect you. I'm chairing a inquiry into the shooting at Walter Sisulu University just here. I'm chairing that inquiry now, where 9 students were shot and allegedly shot with live ammunition. And we've finished the inquiry, and there will be a report. So, and I continue to receive those complaints because I'm also education commissioner of people being expelled for protesting, not just students but also faculty, So can we hear from students, how do we break that sense of, because we know there are problems. I receive complaints from this university, from students about accommodation, about fees, about debts, about historical debts, about sexual harassment. So we do know there are problems, about lack of space to discourse. But those complaints cannot just come to me as a human rights commissioner. So what is a space of critical dialogue with the institution? Because of course universities must be spaces for dialogue, dissent, omhabul, right? So yeah, I want to hear from you. But you said something at the end, intergenerational dialogue. Very, very important. Very, very important, because if it's an honest dialogue, those students will tell you the mistakes that they've made. If it's an honest dialogue, because mistakes were made. They will tell you the gains that they've made and why those gains were able to be secured. About insourcing, my goodness, it's now accepted that outsourcing is a problem. It is still there, but everyone knows, even institutions, that outsourcing is a problem. It must not happen. And a lot of institutions, the curriculum has changed. And a lot of institutions, people that look like me are there, are in the classroom. So demographically, there's some changes. So there were a lot of gains, but there are also a lot of setbacks. So that intergenerational dialogue becomes important. But not a dialogue where the veterans, can you call them veterans?
Not yet.
Or 10 years is veterans, certainly. Don't come from the position of, oh, we know better than you. Conditions are different today also, So yeah, that intergenerational dialogue becomes important. Yes, Biko and Sibukwe are collectives. Biko and Sibukwe are collective. Certainly Steve Biko talks about that all the time. Biko was banished. What is to be banned? He was banned to Ginsberg at a very young age. At a very young age, isolated, but the movement continued. Because it was a collective movement. People like Pitaya, Mampele, and others, Seth Cooper, and so forth, right? So, yes, we must emphasize that you are quite correct. We must emphasize the fact that they are collectives and not make them into superstars. Yes, there was spirituality during Feast Must Fall. Okay, maybe. There were songs that were sang, the decolonized national anthem, and the heart of it talks about, we are fighting against Satan. And the heart of the decolonized anthem. Do you remember that? Silwe. That's spirituality. You are quite right. So it was there, but it was not there. It was there, it was not there. Someone wrote a book to say, Chikane, Dr. Chikane wrote a book to say Feast Must Fall was a revolution of coconuts.
Okay.
What does he mean by that? Completely wrong. Completely wrong. But the point was that the movement was not monolithic, was not homogeneous. That is the point. But you're quite right, yes. There was some spirituality. Whether spirituality in the songs, in the dance, manifested subjectively within the movement, but also in the demands. We can debate that. Universities are microcosms of society. As you were saying in your opening, yeah. They are microcosms of society, right? Let's go back to Biko again, Steve Biko and his colleagues, engaging with the community. So you're quite right that, you go back to the community, you try to do this work, but there's tensions sometimes, Tensions because sometimes we think we know better than the community because we've learned a bit of English. So when we go to do activism, we parachute. It's a parachuting. Steve Biko and them said we will use dialectical concertization. They use that word. Dialectical concertization. Of course, borrowed from Paulo Freire. Remember Paulo Freire? Pedagogy of the Oppressed. That's the book, right? They use that book. They use the book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, to say we are going to learn from the community and the community will learn from us. Dialectical concertization. So you're quite right. You go, try to do activism in the community. They've got other priorities. Right? You come to talk about gender-based violence, they say, but no, we need water. You come to talk about water, they say, no, but... So activism is really, first of all, about being part of the community, not parachuting in to teach because you're a student, So for me, that methodology of dialectical concertization becomes very important.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul. Okay, another exciting round of questions. Fantastic. Okay, cool. Okay, let me start with Asif. Wasn't that lady there? Let's not silence him.
No, wait, it's Asife,
Lihle.
and Lola. Lola.
Hey, Eric. I let the people speak. Look at the elders can reflect. Let the elders reflect. Please settle down.
I think the spirit
I can't see where.
So Igama will Asipe, and look, I am puzzled by the idea. I think a lot of people from Fanon wrote about the idea of a settlers town, and seeing the university as that settlers town. Now it is so difficult to see a settlers town, as you were saying, Prof, if the faces have changed.
Yes.
The occupiers of that settlers town.
Yeah.
Now it goes to Masco. This idea of thinking about Fees Must Fall as a post, I do not believe there's a post movement.
Yep.
A movement is a wave. The reason why the older generation played us, by the way, I was part of Masco at Nelson University, and the reason why we are blamed for being the coconuts, it's because they took it personal to reflect on their own failures when it comes to the movement of apartheid, but not seeing it as they were blindsided by a blanket which is covering the wound that we are unveiling and also still covering at the same time. Now the problem with that, and I see a lot of people also, we were absorbed by the system. We were mascot, we were absorbed by the system.
What do you mean absorbed?
Not only us, we got employments because one, we qualified, but also two, it was a sense of monitoring because they could see our form of activism. Now what happens if you are an individual who can move past that monitoring and surveillance? You run the movement on your own and you pay for it with your soul. Because what we have failed is to actually remember the idea of community. You fight your battles in these institutions on your own. So when you move to Rhodes University from Mandela, for example, the system is shifting you out of the door. Even though you know you belong, but there's no sense of community. So you continue paying for it with your soul. So how do we keep activism? By rebuilding communities amongst ourselves. One thing the system hates is the idea of caucus because they stole it. So when and where do we caucus? To heal, to rest the fatigue of activism, but also to push one another back as we are being pushed out of the world.
Wow.
My question is really, thank you both for your engagement. I think my question is around, this question of belonging. I think it's in my head who belongs in institutions and who doesn't. When we look at institutions of higher learning in this new apartheid, we see that university becomes a place of resistance for the blacks, as opposed to a place of knowledge creation, or a place that encourages engagement. Now, on this mention, one of the aims of the Fees Must Fall is unmasking of coloniality. But when we look into institutions, or let me just say Rhodes University, there's a difficulty in doing that because such spaces are not created for engagement at a student level, at a management level. And then my question is, how do we then encourage activism in such a space? And I can tell you now, and you are the perfect person to know this, you are the combination. Just a few weeks ago, there were students that were isolated and prosecuted by the institution. And it's because they spoke about their own truth and spoke about the meaning of Ubuntu, which is truth and justice. How do we seek the truth? How do we seek justice in such a place? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Prof, you just said something that hits very closer to home, by the way. You spoke of the institutional cultures not changing, and I think it's very important that we must, take into consideration that these cultures and these institutional rules were created during the times of apartheid, meaning they were against us already before we were even here. By the way, this is where I want to go on the issue of protest. Section 17 of the Constitution, Prof, is very clear about protesting, that everyone has got a right to protest, and it's only got two limitations, which is peaceful and unarmed. For as long as the two, is not broken, then I do believe that a person should still enjoy the full protection of the Constitution. However, now we've got a very serious problem in these institutions, which have got rules that they have created, which seek to criminalize peaceful protests. For instance, you are talking to a person who is standing a trial against this university for participating in the most peaceful protest in the history of protests in South Africa. Prof, I just want to ask you that after 30 years of democracy, I find it so sad that we are even having this conversation today. And courts in South Africa have maintained it, that, marginalized groups and poor people have only got one tool that they can use to make sure that those who are in authorities, they do give attention to their issues. And that is protest, which is like a golden right that is protected by the Constitution. How do we move, Prof, from here when we are still, being called to come to hearings and being threatened of being excluded just for participating in the most peaceful protests? And Prof, we've got a problem in these institutions that those who are in authorities, they just make sure that they suppress all forms of democracy. They suppress all forms of public discourse, as long as that it challenges, the core interests of these institutions. So now, Prof, I just want to ask you, how do we move as this generation today, who believe that we are born free, who believe that, we were born after the whole apartheid, was demolished, but we are still seeing a lot of institutional racism against, ordinary black students in these institutions. Prof, how do we move when these authorities capture each and every structure that is there, to ensure that the students' interests are held? How do we move, Prof? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your questions. Prof, over to you.
But you guys are supposed to answer some of these questions. Let me start with the last one. You are quite right, and it's important for us to say this over and over again. about the limitations of the right to protest. Only those two limitations. Armed, not allowed. Violent, not allowed. But any other form of protest must be supported, must be encouraged by the university. Even in some universities, lecturers march with students to demand social service delivery from the town, but not from the university. So it's a bit, yeah, it's a bit confusing. I won't comment about this university because this issue might come to me as a commissioner. As I said, I'm chairing an inquiry for Water Sisulu and other places. So don't compromise me so that I end up having to recuse myself. I don't want to recuse myself. I want to deal with these issues. So I don't want to comment directly. But certainly in South Africa, we see the shrinking civic space. My friend Ayanda Kota, may his soul rest in peace. Good friend of mine. He suffered a lot. He really suffered a lot. Abahleli basemjondolo in Durban. Between 2005 and after today, 24 of the leaders have been assassinated. In democracy. So it's not only universities. I want to affirm your point without talking about this institution. To say we see the shrinking of the civic space. We see the hollowing out of democracy in many institutions, in many platforms in our societies, where democracy has become meaningless. It only means voting every 4 years. If you are sick on that day, my goodness, you engage in democracy after 8 years. University, you vote once and then that's it, go away. And of course, our leaders who we vote for in universities also sometimes, we can talk about, yeah. So I want to affirm the right to protest. You are quite right. One of the questions that I'm always asked as a commissioner for education is, what is violent protest? What is violent protest? Is a sit-in violent? We are going to sit in, we refuse to go. Is that violent? Is coming into a hall where people are writing exams and throwing away their books, is that violent? So as the university, we need to agree on the rules to affirm the right to, because the third concern that I see is this wide interdicts. We see a big wide interdicts. It says we interdict first respondents, Madlingozi, 2, and all protesting students. How about 2? Doesn't even mention who. Very wide. And the interdict is so wide that it nullifies the right to protest. It doesn't protect the university. Immediately when you gather and you caucus, you have breached the interdict and you can be arrested. So I'm very, very concerned about this wide interdicts from some of the universities. Some of the interdicts are even preemptory, even before a protest. So as soon as you protest, bah, that's not an interdict. That's not an interdict. So shrinking civic space in South Africa, the capturing of democracy, and the isolation of leaders. And the isolation of leaders, someone was talking about that also. It works. It really works. When you see that brave guy going to trial every 2 weeks, it's not in the classroom, he doesn't have money, he's suspended. You don't want that to happen to you. You know? So how do we fortify ourselves so that we are a collective? We're not individual leaders. How do we fortify ourselves? But also, let's not be sacrificial lambs. Don't be sacrificial lamb. Your family needs you. Your family needs you. So let's protest. Let's be leaders, but let's be part of the movement. Because the movement can also betray you. Belonging. You say universities have become a place of resistance. And by that you don't mean resistance in the sense of that resistance, but resistance in the form of nervous condition. The university is resisting you. So I understand you to say that universities are places of resistance in the sense that the university is resisting you. Not that they are places of protest and dissent and contestation. We feel that, I felt that as a student, I felt that as an academic, that you don't belong. There's always this gap. There's always this gap between yourself and the institution. And the only way to belong is to assimilate. But you can never assimilate fully. You can never assimilate, fully. So, truth and justice becomes very important. So I also want to talk about new forms of protest. Feast must fall, veterans, some of them say, you guys are not as brave as us. But maybe there are new forms of protest. By the way, I'm not just been sending a tweet. It's enough. Say, tweet is my form of protest. Okay, maybe, but that can't be enough. But how do we explore new forms of protest today? What are the gaps? Can we co-opt certain academics? How do we co-opt certain academics? Some of us were co-opted by the students, and we suffered a lot. Right? So how do you co-opt? This thing of fighting all the lecturers. No, these 30, some of them co-opt them here. Is it possible? Is it possible to co-opt, some of them? So, yeah, truth and justice becomes very important. New forms of protest becomes important. Can the university ever be a place of true belonging? Can a university ever be a form of belonging? The way the university came to Africa as settler institutions have not fundamentally changed. As offshore universities, when vice chancellors are interviewing to be vice chancellors, they say, I want to make us the new Harvard of Africa. I want to make Harvard host university the new Cambridge of South Africa. They are proud to say that. So what does it mean to be the settler town that has changed color? And how do you define that? Because as someone was saying, apartheid was easy. Somebody says apartheid was easy. Neo-apartheid. Colonialism is easy to fight against. Neo-colonialism, much, much harder. So you talk about settler town and settler universities. How do we deal with that, And you're quite right, some of us say we'll fight the system from within. So we'll become academics, we'll become heads of departments, directors, will fight from within. But you lose your soul. You gain some things, you push some things, you open spaces, but your soul suffers. But maybe that's the price. I don't know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Before we go to our last round of burning questions, I'd like to ask a question, because for me, it was actually in this lecture venue where a woman lecturer that I looked up to actually informed us that, well, when you're in an institution of this nature, it's important to have two pairs of shoes. Your walking shoes and your running shoes. Because what these universities do have a tendency of isolating lecturers who dissent, who speak against the university when there is ill treatment, either of staff or students.
That's right.
And so now, as you said earlier on, that students' families need them.
Yeah.
What about the precarity that particularly women lecturers find themselves in, particularly black women lecturers, find themselves in for standing in solidarity with students and other staff members? How do they make sense of existing, and not just existing, but thriving in these institutions? Because they too are needed by their families. But that could be a conversation for another day. Okay, burning questions. Hi.
But also some answers, please. Not just questions. How?
Okay. Okay, we'll take. Yes, you, Eric. Can you see that young lady in the hoodie, grey hoodie, and then the hair, then the last lady? Yes. Then.
So you say one?
Yeah, 4. Yes. Vuyo.
Better question, an answer.
I really loved all the comments that were said here. Before I came to Rhodes, I did my research about student activism and what it's all about. And I've been, I was bored and decided to read about the cases that was happening in 2015, 2016. Kensane Maseko, Yolanda Janti, the list goes on and on and on. Universities, when we stand up for students and when you push to a certain level, and when you break protocols and you break rules, then now you get punished for those things. When you stand up for students, when you advocate for students, in the way that they don't want you to react, they will use that against you to try to punish you because you did not follow the channels of communication. Because if you disrupt, if you cause chaos, if you protest, if you speak out, you are disruptful. What is the solution? Why even decolonizing this institution? We still have the statues here. Great Hall, for example, by Monument. The statues decolonize this institution. Like, what is the solution for us to stand up? That's why I said, we need students to stand together and fight for these things. Because if we don't, then there is an isolation. There won't be isolation when everybody wants to protest. Now, I don't need to protest because I have flowers of tutorial. It's not affecting me. There's issues, students are starving, students are hungry. I'm not an SFA student, I'm a trust fund baby. So why should I care? That attitude that we as students have should end. That we should stand together and fight for these students. And that's also some of the attitude that some students have. And that is how they isolate people and they take them up there and then they go into hearings. Because if we were really one, if we were really together, we should be all caucusing. We should be all speaking out. Because you protest one day, they single out one person, the next day, everything is back to normal. Everybody go back to class. Like nothing happened the previous day. Because these are issues that are every single year, NASFAS, every single year, we talk about student issues. It's going to happen again next year. And again next year, and again next year. It's the same cycle. It's gonna, nothing changes. So what will it take for us to change? We need to stand together. If we don't stand together, if we just sit back and not do anything, and not stand together and make a change, nothing will ever change. I'm not saying students are not as I said, even politics in society, in Rhodes University. Rhodes University say they don't recognize political societies. But political societies are under SRC. So now you have to follow a lot of channels of communication for something to get done. Until, for example, if you want something to get done, so if you, let's say a student is struggling with something, you can't find an accommodation, you have to go to this person and that person, and then this student is struggling, this student is hungry, the student wants food now, the student wants accommodation now. You know what I'm saying? These channels of communication is wasting time. Okay. You need to get down the steps, get straight to the point, and you know what I'm saying?
Happy night,
I
think the registration.
And now that we have it in concrete states. So now, with decolonization, how do we know that the cake that we are making of decolonization, all the ingredients, like you said, substance from the water, decolonizing from the water, all the ingredients. How do we know that once the cake is made, it's a cake that we can eat? And another thing is that I have problems with institutions. They do not guard academic freedom and rights to speak up for students. And what is the purpose of institutions if they don't do that? And again, with our vice chancellors and all the people in charge of decision making and all of that, why do they not assist students when they know that decolonization, things like fees must go up, important things that should be taken place and happening, but they are not siding with us. Who are they siding with? And who are we choosing to put there as our vice chancellors and people who are doing representations and at the same time training us? I don't know that students were fighting, but again, it is hard working on fighting and it's like we're hitting a wall, nothing will actually happen. So we need help, from the out
my question is, does this phrase in northern peoples that they say, if you do not like the law, you challenge it? Now, in this case, I'm referring to the law that is refraining us from exercising our rights of student activism. Now, there's a procedure that needs to happen when you challenge the law, right? And what happens when you want to challenge a law that has a flawed procedure? When you want to challenge a law whereby you need to go through the oppressors themselves. I don't know if I'm using the right concepts like the oppressors, but the oppressors themselves in order to challenge the procedure. Thank you so much.
And I suppose it's a little bit unfair to expect that when hindsight is, something that comes with lived experience. So I'm going to answer two questions related to critique and related to spirituality. Because I think at the foundation, or what I found for myself in my own personal politics and striving to achieve social justice in space is that you need to locate yourself within a historical continuum. And that's a useful thing to do because then you realize that perhaps the people you look to for answers or from whom you look at as examples how one comports themselves within a particular democratic dispensation, within a particular context, may approach you. And then it goes into the who reflects on this. And he talks about the example of Moses leading the children of Israel to the promised land. And he said, and he uses this in the context of the generation of Mandela and the revisiting the idea of they have failed us in some ways. And he contextualizes the late history and late generational purpose of having brought us to a certain point in history where then a certain generation also begins with their generational purpose. And so when I link this to spirituality, I identify as a Black feminist and born in a Christian spiritual context, but open to all sorts of ideas of belief. And I am particularly suspicious of organized religion and suspicious of institutions really. But I do draw comfort from ideas that come from more egalitarian forms of religion within the historical context, and even ideas from Buddhism that talk about being born with a karmic debt, which each of us, I believe, we have. And once you, and before you know what that karmic debt or that purpose, you have been born in this particular historical lifetime with the identification that you carry within the spectrum of intersectionality and in this continent. You might struggle when you feel supported by others with whom you thought you carried a similar identification. When they agree, when they feel weird, but what allows you to continue is being willing and being so surrendered to the idea of, I know what my karmic debt for having been born in this time in history is this purpose in having been born in this generation. And I suppose that requires being in a real business and yet seem individualistic, that you'll find the people who you can trust. And one last thing, you have something like struggle, and one last thing I want to say about protest, that it's also wise to consider your tactics and strategies for protest within orders and institutions of power that exist within the kind of neoliberal agenda. And if that is something that you know for yourself, you kind of need to be absorbed by. That's when the tactics and strategies they become subversive and they have to and sometimes become alert when you use it.
I think you should answer Prof.
No, thank you for those. Is that Benny? Huh? No, there was a hand up. Okay.
Please keep it short. Yeah.
Yes, please. Please go ahead.
Okay. So, in my solution, the material conditions here at Rhodes University suggest that a lot of the students are largely being suppressed, student activism more in particular. What this means is that we need to get people who are strong activists to be the ones that are contesting spaces of leadership. You understand it? Because it's very important that in part of our revolution to reducing the suppression of student activism, we to ensure that it's the people who spearhead that process, so that our student leadership voices are not those people who get into leadership for the fact that they want to sharpen their CVs, but it's the people who shape the policy art. You understand? So that means that the people that are going to be going into space like the SLC, or labs, all sorts of class reps and all those things, that they are there for a just cause and a just reason to see through the change that they want to see. Because if you keep on electing people just off the basis that they speak nicely and less of them being student activists and sharing the activism within them, it means that we are going to run another useless course of people being student leaders. So my solution would be that we need to politicize strongly the spaces of leadership that our students are involved. That means that the SRC must be people who are anti-radical, that are not afraid to challenge systems, because these are the systems that oppress students strongly.
Okay, thank you.
No, that's a good note. Good note to end on. Let me not spoil it. Both comments. Thank you so much. You talked about the need to distinguish between tactics and strategy. That's very, very important, colleagues. What is a tactic and what is a strategy? What is the end goal and what is the means of getting to that end goal? If we understand the distinction, we'll understand that there's no need for purity. You know, people like to be pure. You know, I'm a socialist. I'm a feminist. I'm a what? This purity. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices and compromises. What is a tactic? What is a strategy? They need to stand together. We spoke about standing together. FISMA's fall was able to be sustained over many weeks because it was not an ANC SASCO fight. It was not an EFF fight. It was not a BASMA fight. It was a cross-party alliance and even a socio-economic alliance. Do we still have that at our universities? That people from different ideologies and different socio-economic circumstances and different bodies can stand together. You know, I've seen in some places the national leadership of political parties coming into university and messing things up, dividing the students actually. So how do we maintain this truly standing together from a cross-party alliance, from an inter-class alliance, and even gender and race alliance? So standing together really means that we have to compromise. We have to listen to one another. Some of us don't know how to code Fanon, but we know decoloniality. So how do we accommodate that? The cake becomes very important, you know. So, you know, I talk about the cake in two ways. There's a cake of decoloniality, where we have said we are decolonizing by changing the names, changing the curriculum, changing the demographics. But that is adding the spice on the European cake. The cake is still European, you just add African spice. So let's be careful of this cake. The cake in South Africa has stayed the same. and a few people have been allowed to participate. And those of us who have been allowed to participate, we are the biggest bodyguards of this cake. How do we deal with these bodyguards of the cake?
We eat them.
Because these are bodyguards that look like us. The bodyguards that look like us. Because they get crumbs of the cake. They're very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. So I like that metaphor. I like that metaphor. What is the role of students in electing the VC? Do you have any role in the election of the VC? Do you play any role in the appointment of heads of departments? Do you play any role in the appointment of the DVC and the dean? So you're quite right. What are these structures? Who are they for? We should be very honest. If students have no role to play in the election of institutional structures, the structures will never serve them. Sometimes they will make a mistake and serve them, but fundamentally, because they don't belong to them, there will always be that disjuncture. How do we fundamentally democratize council? How do we fundamentally democratize the Senate? How do we democratize the SRC, as you say? That we don't just elect leaders and then we don't see them. We see them, they become the interpreters. Leaders who are interpreters of the message. Now, comrades, they said the following. How it ends there. So you are quite right. We are quite right.
Closing remarks,
Okay, we need to go. We need to go, I'm told. We need to politicize the spaces. We need to politicize the spaces. Please, let's not forget that there are lecturers who are also, as we say, also in the same position, who are never promoted because they stand up for students. Please, let's also, bear them in mind. There are lecturers who truly live decoloniality and transformation, and they're never promoted. They don't get nice overseas gigs. As women, they have a lot of emotional labor. Students are complaining, go to that black lecture. Emotional labor. Full stop.
Thank you so much for giving a round of applause. Okay, a lot has been said, but for now, I would like to welcome Dr. Claire Kelly to give us the closing remarks.
For students, I don't have very much to say, except that I hope this is a taste of things to come. I just picked up on one thing as I was writing my notes. I just kept hearing this word over and over again, which was isolation.
Yeah.
Isolation.
Yeah.
Isolation. And there's something about the words and the idea of community building and strengthening and what a potential way forward community between students and student leadership, community between students and staff, community between generations afterwards, community in the context of history. So I think that there's something in that for us, and I mean, really, it's us. We are our community. Yeah, but I think we've had some very, very important insights this evening. We've heard some very, very important experiences. And I just want to thank you all for being here tonight. It's Friday night.
Yes.
Music night and drop.
Yes. Yes.
You've been up since probably very early this morning. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this community and of this conversation. I also just want to thank my team who are here tonight on a Friday night. So, for being here and of course for putting all this together and making it possible, real relative. I literally just rocked up this evening and things happened.
Yeah, Bonava.
For that. It takes a lot of work to bring people together in this way. And I'm still very grateful for that. I also want to thank people media for being here and for recording this discussion. And I think it's so important. There are people who couldn't be here in the room with us this evening, but this discussion is being recorded for posterity. And I will be sharing it via the director's WhatsApp group as soon as this becomes available. It's important that what was said here this evening is made available throughout the institution. And so thank you to the media for facilitating that. Vico for holding the space. And Professor Madlingozi for coming all the way to the centre of town. And really, I think, inserting a real insight into what it means to live and work and study in the centre of town. And it provides us, I think, a lot of fuel for thought and not a small amount of energy. And we really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's coming all the way out. Thank you. About appreciation, so I will give to you after. Colleagues, just to say thank you for being here. Have a good evening, good rest, and we'll probably do it all again on Monday.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Wow. The thing is. Thank you.
Is that real?